I'm so excited to announce that I'm hosting the Empower Your Fertility Summit. This is a free online event, and it's going to feature 18 healers and experts who are absolutely amazing. Each one of them is going to give incredible tips and advice for your fertility journey to empower you specifically. And also, you'll be getting lots of fun freebies. So be sure to register for this event, which will go live April 5th. But right now you can go ahead and start registering and put it on your calendar, because this is an event you will not want to miss, I promise. So in order to enroll, visit www.empoweryourfertility2021.com/enroll. I'm going to have this link in the episode notes so that you won't be able to miss it. And I'm so excited to see you guys there. Episode number 125 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist, here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So today's guest is Jill Blakeway, who I absolutely love and have had her on episode number 75. So if you guys want to get more of a background on her, that is a great episode to listen to. But today we're going to be talking about a lot of really cool, interesting things, exciting things that she is starting with her Yanova practice, and I'm really excited to have her on. Welcome back to the podcast, Jill.
Well, it's lovely to be back, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
We had such a great conversation the first time, and I told the listeners to check out episode number 75, and now we're going to continue. I know that you've been doing a lot since the pandemic. Things have changed. You guys are doing a lot of new, exciting things, and I'd love for you to share that with the listeners.
Well, thank you. It has, obviously this was a curveball for us all.
For sure.
But one of the things that it prompted us to do was lean into the whole system of Chinese medicine. And I don't know whether people know this, but acupuncturists aren't just acupuncturists. We're trained in traditional Chinese medicine or traditional East Asian medicine. Most of us practice herbology too. And we have a frame of reference about the body that is really useful. So we're really great health coaches, because Chinese medicine was based on prompting the body to heal itself. And we do that with acupuncture needles. We do that with massage, but we can also do that with dietary adjustments and coaching and that kind of thing. So we leaned into our whole system of Chinese medicine, which covers everything we do, and started to offer virtual consults. They've been extremely popular. And so we will be continuing them. We're just starting to come out of lockdown. Our team are mostly vaccinated now, and New York is becoming vaccinated where I practice. But we will always, I think, do some of our work online, because what we've realized is that particularly for initial consults with people, it allows us to just focus in a very clear way by doing it on Zoom. So we did that. We also launched a fertility coaching and support group, and it worked really, really well. I think fertility patients need support, but support groups can sometimes become a little aimless, and people can get triggered by each other's experiences, whether they're bad or good. Someone in the group gets pregnant, everybody else feels understandably sad. And so having a group with an aim, a coaching aim, that is also supportive is quite new, I think, and it works really well. Some of our experienced practitioners take people through my 3-month program for making babies, but condense it to 8 weeks because nobody wants to go to a support group for 3 months. And they take them through a full, how to get pregnant. And we invite people in, and reproductive endocrinologists come to speak at it and things like that. And that has worked really well. In fact, our first group liked each other so much that they now meet on Zoom just to chat without us. does.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
it makes me so happy. And then we thought about how we could use our herbs to help people who don't live in New York. We've always prescribed a tailored herbal formula for every patient, which I think is the gold standard of herbology. And so we've never offered them online. But we do have a fertility quiz in Making Babies where you choose your fertility type. And so we launched herbal formulas for each fertility type. And really that was based, Michelle, on the idea that there isn't one size fits all when it comes to herbs. The reasons people aren't getting pregnant are different, but that we could divide them into 5 groups who require just a sort of different type of support. So that's what we did. And you can take a quiz on unovacenter.com and read about the fertility types and identify yourself as a type, and then buy the herbal formula for your type, which is a much more targeted version of herbal medicine for fertility than just buying something because you've been told it's a fertility herb. As you know, Michelle, there is no such thing as a fertility herb. It depends what's wrong with.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great if there was, but
if there was
not.
One magic panacea would be.
I know, it would be simple. Really but so let's talk about that, because I know it's in your book, Making Babies, you talk about the fertility types. Can we go through each one for the listeners?
Well, I have to tell you that when Dr. David is a reproductive endocrinologist, and we wrote this book together, and he's a very experienced reproductive endocrinologist. He was, in fact, we're all going to show our age here, but he was, in fact, the first RE to do a successful IVF in New York State.
Oh, wow.
So we wrote this book together, and we started with that premise that there isn't a sort of one size fits all. And when we first wrote it, we had 12 fertility types, so we had to edit it down. But as we talked about our experience of patients, one of the things that we realized is there's different advice we want to give to different sets of people, and sometimes it can be conflicting. So to give you some examples, we divided people into types and just gave them names, based on both Chinese medicine and Dr. David's experience with his patients practicing conventional reproductive endocrinology. And our first type was the stuck type. And these are people who in Chinese medicine have some kind of qi or blood stagnation, is what we would say. From a Western point of view, they tend to be a little estrogen dominant. The transformations, that very fine feedback system that happens every month goes a little awry. And so they tend to have low progesterone thanks to having a slight overabundance of estrogen, because their liver, which is supposed to take up excess estrogen and process it, is a little, sludgy, is how I like to think of it, just performing under par. And so we wanted to create a program for those people and a herbal formula that supports the liver to take up estrogen and deals with all those slightly estrogen dominant symptoms. So that's things like PMS and irregular periods, but also at its furthest extent, endometriosis or fibrocystic breasts, that kind of thing, fibroids. And so we wanted to put those people into one group and say to them, you need to support your liver, and here's how to do it. And we give a dietary program. So lots of leafy greens, some exercise. People always think about circulation going through the heart, but it has to go through the liver too, and it moves everything through. Plenty of exercise, and we created a formula for them. And we took those people off plant estrogens because they already have an excess of estrogens. We also take them off
like phytoestrogens,
chemical estrogens. So these are the people who need to clean out their cupboards and take out those household cleaners and cosmetics and skincare products that have chemical estrogens or chemicals that mimic estrogen and disrupt hormone balance. So that's just one set. But we have a completely opposite set of people who are heading towards menopause and still trying to conceive. And those people often get pregnant, but they need a little more estrogen. They have either very short or very long cycles. They're sometimes anovulatory, and they have what we call yin deficiency in Chinese medicine, which, as you know, means that it really is part of low estrogen when it comes to fertility medicine, and it leads to hot flashes and vaginal dryness and a feeling of sort of night sweats, a feeling of sort of flushing up, that kind of thing. And so we call those people the dry type, and we actually wanted to give them slightly more plant estrogen based advice. You know, those people can have some tempeh and miso and things like that. I like the fermented soy products for people better than I do the non-fermented ones, to be honest, because I think the non-fermented ones are quite hard to digest, and I see people have trouble with them. So that's just two of the types, the dry and the stuck, but they're kind of opposite to each other. And then then we have three more, and one of them we call the pale type. And these people are just undernourished, and it may not be their fault. Some people are over-exercising and under-eating, but some people aren't. They're just not, they don't have the digestive system that works well enough to get nutrition from food. And so we wanted to give them a program that helped them nourish themselves. At the farthest end of this, these are our people with hypothalamic amenorrhea, and that kind of thing, which means no periods due to miscommunication between the pituitary and the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, really. So we wanted to nourish them deeply. These are the people who do well on bone broth if they're not vegetarian. Often they are actually vegetarian, in which case we do sort of mushrooms, power mushrooms and things like that. And those people do very well. They get their periods back. I'm sure you find this in your practice, do you? That the people with amenorrhea, often if you get their digestive system working properly, get their period back.
Actually, I find it to be a very simple fix.
Yes.
It's just a matter of just changing a couple of things. And sometimes it's also a mental block because people are used to exercising a lot, and it's become like mentally they believe that that's the best thing for themselves. So it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around something that you've been taught or have believed for so long. And that's the biggest hurdle I find. Everything else actually works out pretty easy.
I agree. Those are my easiest patients,
yeah.
to be honest. And you're right. And our job is to help them mediate a line through it, because, of course, we don't want to take them off exercise altogether. Right. It's good for their heart. It's good for their mood. A lot of people tell me that they need exercise in order to deal with stress, and I totally get it. So we help them mediate that line and give them lots of nourishing herbs. And so that's the pale type. And then we have two more types, and they're very similar actually, but we wanted to offer slightly different advice to both of them. So the first one is the tired type, and those people are what you and I know as kidney yang deficient, spleen qi and kidney yang deficient. So a lot of our fertility patients, and they run cold and they're tired, and they tend to have fluctuating energy. They often wake up groggy. They kind of get going with a couple of cups of coffee and then they flag in the afternoon. They often crave sugar, and because they're tired, and they often have metabolic sluggishness. They can be at the far end of that, hypothyroid, but they often put on what I call unfair weight. Like, you know, we all know what fair weight is if you're just sitting there eating ice cream, but they're the people who put on weight really easily and have trouble getting it off. So those metabolic issues create problems for getting pregnant. There's a real link between insulin resistance and infertility, and so we wanted to treat them by giving them yang tonics and qi tonics in Chinese medicine, and treat the fatigue, and give them a little bit more, we're sort of boosting their battery pack, really. And that's what that program is designed for. We like them to have lots of soup. They need relatively easy to digest foods, because they need
warm nature.
Yes, warm foods, that kind of thing. So those are them. And then a continuation of that is what we call the waterlogged type. And those are those same people, but in Chinese medicine, we'd see them as more damp. They're more mucus producing. And those people often have PCOS. So they have the insulin resistance of the tired type and the metabolic issues, but it's causing them to have elevated androgens and cysts on their ovaries, and they get irregular menses, and all the issues that come from having elevated androgens, which are considered to be male hormones, although we all have them. And if you have too much of them, you start to have skin breakouts and unwanted hair growth, hair in places that you didn't want to have hair, that kind of thing, easy weight weight gain. And so we gave them a similar formula and a similar program, but more what we would call damp clearing. We take out anything mucus producing in their diet. So that those people do well when we take them off dairy.
Like dairy, yeah.
Yes. And off gluten and things like that, so that they're not becoming both inflamed and then mucus producing. And those people do really well. It takes them a little, people with PCOS who say don't have a period, which often happens with PCOS, they often don't ovulate. We can usually regulate them to have a period within 3-4 months. It takes a little longer than the pale type that we were talking about, but it's definitely worth doing. And they stand more chance of an IVF working if we work with them beforehand, because we're resourcing the eggs. And they often, if they, I just had one get pregnant, actually, they can often get pregnant naturally if they have a regular cycle. Obviously, if you're not ovulating, you just can't get pregnant.
Right.
So the first thing is to get them to ovulate. And as you know, Michelle, acupuncture is really good for that. There's lots of research that shows that acupuncture can get anovulatory women to ovulate. And I don't know whether you know this, but the original research was done on rabbits.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Because apparently, and I didn't know this, rabbits that aren't sexually active don't ovulate.
Oh, interesting.
And so they gave the rabbits acupuncture and they could get them to ovulate even though they weren't sexually active. And in fact, that research then informed the next sort of research, which was on anovulatory PCOS patients. And the same acupuncture that worked with the bunnies works
That's
with
so
people. Interesting. I know.
I didn't know that. Wow. That's fascinating. So I wanted to get your thoughts on exercising while you have your period, or sweating too much when you have your period. I was thinking about that when we were talking about hypothalamic amenorrhea and also the dry type. Yeah.
Well, you just always have to take your own body into context. And I think Americans particularly are a power through group of people. And it can be deeply impressive as a foreigner who lives here. I'm just like, oh, wow, they power through. In New York, when I have the luxury of not doing an early shift these days because I have a big team and I'm getting older. But I used to start work at 7 a.m. And there were women who would come to me and they had already been to the gym. And I would be so impressed.
Yeah, that is impressive.
I mean, they literally, or they'd played tennis at 5 a.m. and then they would come to me and then they were going to work and they'd hit their desk at sort of 8, sort of thing. So all of this powering through and the esteem we give people for powering through means that we ignore our body. We're just powering through. And so it depends on how much energy you have, whether you should exercise during your period. But your period is a time when you're losing blood. And so you are a little under-resourced. And again, I think as women, we've spent a lot of time, particularly in the workplace, hiding the fact that we have a period. Yes, like that, we've internalized that very sexist criticism about women around their periods, and we've taken it on and we've started to sort of, everything's fine. But in fact, in the places where you can go a little slower, it makes sense to do it in the period week and let your body resource itself, because your body, from a fertility perspective, has a whole new challenge ahead of itself. It's about to build a new lining and resource lots of antral follicles, one of which is going to become the lead. And that requires energy. It requires your body to be, to be resourced itself. So not draining yourself when you're already losing a bit of blood is a good idea. And these things are always nuanced. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean you can't do any exercise at all or anything like that, but you might want to lay off the aerobic exercise that week and maybe do stretching or weights or something
like yin yoga, something a little bit more like
something.
I love the whole idea of cycle syncing and really honoring every single part of our cycle. As we know, corporate America, it's all male dominant, male cycle, male everything. And I think that my theory is that it actually does affect women's hormones. Like, I really do. Living that kind of life is going to affect fertility and hormones.
Well, just being under stress affects your hormones. I
Yeah.
remember I once had a patient who was a lawyer and she was so stressed. And she would come for acupuncture and listen to legal cases on her earphones.
Yeah.
And I would feel so sorry for her that her job was like that, that she didn't have a spare moment. But also, it was just, she was hard to get pregnant because she was running so tight. And
Yeah.
eventually we had a conversation about, look, I said to her, look, I understand that your job is really stressful and I want to support you with it. But I think the best way we can support you is to have a pressure release button. You
Yeah.
can't just live under this pressure day
Yeah.
in, day out. If you're going to be this pressurized, then you need to find ways of decompressing. You need to find ways of coming back to calm. And acupuncture could be one of them if you would,
Yes.
if you wanted not to listen to legal cases. She actually, because she was a lawyer and very organized, she scheduled all sorts of little blocks of resourcing herself in her week. And she got pregnant
There
really
you
quick.
go. That works.
Yeah.
That actually works. And I say, for people that have to be on a schedule, put yourself on the schedule just like that. And when they do, it really makes all the difference. It's just a matter of, it's almost like mental types. We have body types and we also have ways that we all conduct our life. Some people like to kind of go wing things and other people like to put it on a schedule and so make it work.
All is good.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Michelle, but my patients get stressed about being stressed.
Yes.
And I always tell them, as a certain amount of stress is inevitable. Stressed
Right.
people get pregnant. What's
True.
important is actually to be able to recover. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily about being under stress. It's being under constant stress with no rebalancing, I think, is so damaging.
Yeah, and also to kind of take it to it from a different perspective, that it's really more about them feeling good. It's not about just the baby. It's not about just, the reproductive health. It's about them enjoying life right now and not having to wait for that joy.
Well, I think that's very wise, actually. And one of the things that patients tell me and I observe is a fertility journey is not something I would wish on anyone. It's really very, very hard for a lot of people. And I've done this for a long time and held people's hands through it for a long time. And I have an enormous amount of compassion for that. However, there are some gifts in it. And patients tell me that, I learned to relax. When I could, I learned some work-life balance. I changed my diet. I did things that made me feel better. And I think it's cold comfort. I'd rather they didn't have to go through this journey.
Yeah.
But there are some things you can learn along this journey that you will take with you. And you will live a happier and healthier life because of it. And there is meaning in it in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And even though it's a very difficult way to get the meaning, but there is nonetheless things that, I've seen it a lot as well, like people saying, my life is so much better now, and they're not even at the point where they got pregnant. They didn't get the goal, but they're like, I'm so appreciative for what I have right now compared to what it was a couple of weeks or months ago. I feel better about life. Things don't affect me as much, and it's just important to fill your cup. I think that that's really what it comes down to, because fertility journey is very draining. It's extremely draining. So it's important to, if you are in a place where you're going to be draining a lot of your energy, to fill it back up.
And I think it's a good preparation for parenthood.
Yeah.
Where you need to fill your cup in order to resource
Sure.
other human beings. So, good lesson to learn.
Yeah,
Ahead
without a
of
doubt.
Yeah,
For sure.
that you're going to do some self-care around it all because, obviously looking after small children is very draining too. And
Yeah, without a
resourcing
doubt.
yourself with that. Important. That is the sort of old, the airplane, when you're on the airplane and they say, put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on the baby. That is motherhood in a nutshell.
It is.
You're no use to anyone if you're on your knees.
It's
You're
true.
just exhausted.
There's such truth to that on so many levels, and it shows itself in so many different parts of our life, really. But talk about, like, how does a person? Obviously, not everybody who's listening can afford acupuncture, can afford coaching. How can somebody get more in tune with their own intuition and their own body's cues? because I do believe, our bodies are so intelligent. I know you share that because you talk about it, and you talk about it a lot in the books, about how we have we're part of this vast intelligence, and this intelligence can speak to us and guide us. How does one begin to get into that state of listening to that guidance?
I think the first thing is to understand that your body is extremely intelligent and taking decisions all day, completely outside of your mind. It's calibrating your thyroid. It's making sure you ovulate. All of this requires awareness and then the ability to act. And so the first thing is to have some appreciation for the things that go right, which we never do. Insteadly, our bodies are, miraculously, human nature. Miraculously keeping us in balance for the most part. So just having some appreciation for what it takes for your body to do that, and then think about how to help it. Like, how can I help my body do this extraordinarily intelligent thing? Well, it needs energy. You can't let yourself get too depleted. As we know, people start to develop chronic diseases and imbalances when they get exhausted. And that's because their body doesn't have enough energy to do this complex communication that it does, this awareness at a cellular level. And every cell knows who it is and where it is in relation to other cells, if it's healthy, and can act on a prompt. That takes energy. So you need to be able to feel when you're tired and not have that push through attitude that I talked about before, but kind of honor it. And then I think we live in our heads an enormous amount. We're like sort of heads, we barely feel our bodies. And I know that often with patients, when I ask them how they feel, they don't know, because they are ignoring a load of stuff. And they're just, their head is so active, there isn't much room to feel. So one of the first things I do with patients actually is do some diaphragmatic breathing all the way down to the pelvic floor. Your diaphragm and your pelvic floor are supposed to work together. They're the top and the bottom of your abdomen, and they don't. You get disconnected, basically. If you live in your head too much, you get disconnected. And what's supposed to happen is, as you breathe in and your diaphragm moves down, your pelvic floor is supposed to relax a little bit. And then as you breathe out, your pelvic floor is supposed to tighten a little bit and your diaphragm goes up. And that kind of breathing creates a wave of communication in the body that affects digestion, it affects reproduction, it affects kidney function, it affects your liver. It's a really important wave of a pulse almost of the breath. We're not just breathing in our lungs. We are, in fact, it is a dynamic process. So I think learning to breathe diaphragmatically and then feeling where that wave gets stuck. Yeah. Right. And when I ask people, I sometimes describe it, Michelle, as where do you feel a little clench in your body? And people can invariably tell me it's often in the solar plexus. Or in the chest, which is anxiety, really. Sometimes it's in the pelvis. And people can often tell me straight away. And then all we do is we bring awareness to it. Nothing more than that. We just bring awareness to it with our mind, because your body has enough consciousness, if it gets a direction, to start looping these little clenches back in. It's what we call qi stagnation in Chinese medicine. And what I think, when I think of these little clenches, Michelle, I think of them as little areas of pain where we've tightened in results, in response to emotional pain or trauma or a physical trauma. And that little area has stopped being looped into this consciousness in the same way. And it thinks of itself as separate now. And it has a whole voice. Eckhart Tolle calls them pain bodies. It has a whole voice that it talks to you about, and it tries to run you. It's because it's no longer part of the whole. And so looping that stagnation, that little area in, is really important. And if people carry on with that little clench, what happens is they reduce blood flow, and over time, tissue that isn't oxygenated properly gets denser and denser. And this is how it's part of the way people get fibroids and other kinds of masses and lumps and things like that. So it's actually really important to find those little clenches and just bring awareness to them and just stay there. And when people do that, their painful story often comes up. And I always encourage people not to get too attached to the painful story. Just sort of let it rattle on in the background. Any negative feelings, just breathe them out, just like you're off gassing, like that, and stay with your awareness there. And you can actually move a lot of that kind of stuckness just by using your mind to loop this area back into, your system of communication in your body.
It's so interesting because everything starts in the spirit. It really starts kind of like in the spirit level, and then it's emotional, and then it kind of progresses if it continues into, like you said, like eventually it goes to the energy, the tissue, and then it becomes like a mass or something, like you can actually palpate it and feel it, and it becomes like really stagnated to the point where it's something's created. And I remember just when I would sit in meditation, I would focus on areas that were painful just by focusing and breathing. Now we know that oxygen kind of works with prana, chi, it has very much a way to move that energy. So when they say breathe into your shoulder, it sounds weird. Your lungs aren't in your shoulder, but it works. It
does work, and that's why it works, because you use your mind to kind of direct that network of communication in your body so that it loops it back in. And as you know, in Chinese medicine, we believe the causes of disease can be internal or external. So you can get a pathogen, but that can often because you're depleted. But a lot of the internal causes of disease in Chinese medicine are actually emotional. And Chinese medicine, as you know, carves them up into different emotions, and which have different effects on organs. But what they were noticing, thousands of years ago with great wisdom, was that different types of toxic emotions create different problems in the body. And they were troubleshooting them both at the level of the physical problem and at the level of the cause, which was a toxic emotion. So not everything that goes wrong in your body is because of your, feelings. We live in a toxic environment. Our bodies are dealing with a lot of pressure. But a lot of disease starts with dis-ease. Starts with falling out of ease in your life, and that becoming physical. And I think Chinese medicine has one of the most well worked out pathways for treating that and for identifying it. And I think it gets missed sometimes in a lot of medicine. And it's one of the things I'm particularly proud of Chinese medicine for. I think it's a particular strength of Chinese medicine that we don't see our emotions as separate from our body, like a separate issue. They are our body, and our emotions get stored in our body and not just in our mind. Our thoughts cause us plenty of pain. But our emotions and our memories, to a certain extent, get stored all over the body. And that's those little clenches we were talking about.
Absolutely. And what I find interesting is when our emotions are feeling at peace, our bodies will be able to resist even the pathogens.
Yes.
So it actually strengthens us and our immune systems. So it is pretty, it's amazing.
Well, the psychoneuroimmunologists, this is the area they dwell in, of course, because the immune system is very affected by our sort of mental activity and our psychological state. And so that's an area that I have watched develop over the last few years in awe. And actually, some of those psychoneuroimmunologists are now doing biofield research. They're now doing research into the human energy field, which is so interesting that we came to the human energy field through Chinese medicine, and they're coming to it through psychoneuroimmunology. I
love it.
But we're all ending up in the same place.
Exactly. And another thing I love about TCM is that it never goes out of style.
It's so good. I wrote Making Babies with Dr. David 10 years ago, and it's still in hardback, and it still sells as well as it always did, because of the sort of timeless wisdom of Chinese medicine. And every now and again, if I'm having a bad day, I go on Amazon and read how many hundreds of people say, I did what they said in the book and I got pregnant. And it just makes me feel happy to think that we disseminated this information so broadly to people. But it is long lasting because it's not changing as such. I mean, we do change our medicine. We do have research, we are evidence-based, but the basic tenets of Chinese medicine are a universal truth, I think, and a universal wisdom that will never go out of style. They had a way of seeing human beings and human health before they had as many solutions as they do now, you know, the ancient doctors. And so they had to work out how to prompt the body to self-heal. And that is as relevant today as it ever was, even though we have much more fancy techniques and medications, which we're all very grateful for. It's still an important skill to be able to get the body to heal itself.
That's right. I mean, that's really at the core of everything. It's interesting because people might hear about TCM or even, you know, doctors in certain medicines, and it's really the body that heals itself, especially with what we do. We just give it the right opportunity to do so.
Well, I was talking to a bunch of reproductive endocrinologists this morning, actually, before I came and did this podcast. And one of the things that I was talking to them about is even when they do surgery, even when they remove a fibroid, obviously they've done something really important there that's going to help people get pregnant, but they're relying on what we would call qi, the body's self-healing ability, the body's intelligence to recalibrate after they've done surgery. And that's the bit that gets ignored. And where we come in is we can help with that. You know, I'm really glad that there are talented surgeons that can take out uterine fibroids so women can conceive. I am really grateful for that. But I think where I come in as an acupuncturist is that in the aftermath and before, I can prepare people to have this surgery so they recover better, and I can help prompt their self-healing ability afterwards so that they have the fewest side effects possible, less scar tissue, with better circulation, less inflammation, with a more communicative immune system. And that's my part in the picture. And that was what I was talking to them about this morning.
Yes, I love it. I mean, that's really how I see it as well. We can support the body and the body's intelligence, really. And that's really what it comes down to, is the body is so intelligent. And when we were talking before about breathing, what's interesting is I'll find that some of my patients that experience a lot of anxiety, they tend to breathe from the chest and not from the diaphragm. And if you think about, I mean, how anxious would you be if you're not getting enough oxygen? You know, it's a physiological effect. So just changing your breath so that it's more efficient, you're actually utilizing your ability to intake oxygen, can make such a difference overall in your body, like, and how you feel mentally.
Yes, well, I mean, I think a lot of people suffer from this, probably all of us at some point.
Yeah.
And I think of the diaphragm like a pivot, and it is, of course, just a muscle. So when you get stressed, it gets tight and it doesn't move. And if it doesn't move, what happens is all that energy that is supposed to, you know, which is really just communication and information that's supposed to disseminate all the way down to your pelvic floor, gets stuck and it rises up, and you end up with this tight, congested feeling in your heart, which makes you anxious and creates anxiety. And we have a lovely formula for this, as you know, called Bancha Xixin Tuang, and which is like a miracle for this. In fact, we have a nice version of it at Unova that's particularly potent, and I often give it to patients along with breathing exercises, because of course what also happens is people start to get hot above the diaphragm because of all this stuckness and congestion, and they're like little pressure cookers getting hot on the inside, and cold below because they're not getting movement, and so they don't have correct circulation, and that causes all sorts of problems. That cold below starts to cause problems with circulation to the uterus and resourcing the ovaries and eggs and things like that. And that heat above causes agitation, insomnia, hunger, sometimes insatiable hunger, that kind of thing. And really just getting the diaphragm to move, releasing that muscle, evens out all those hot and cold patches so that people feel more integrated and more peaceful.
Yeah, for sure. And also, like you said, getting into your body, because if we try to fix what's going on here when we're already in the state that we're at, we're going to go in circles. So it's about kind of feeling your body and getting into that physical sensation. And really, I mean, self-compassion as well. Like you said, not being stressed about being stressed.
Yes, no, it's okay. It's all okay. Stressed people get pregnant.
Yes.
And that's the worst thing. I think people read about the effect of stress on fertility, and then they get stressed.
Yeah.
And understandably. And so again, it's very nuanced. It's what stress is doing to your body. You don't have to hermetically seal yourself against life or give up your really stressful job or whatever, but you do need to behave like you have a body and not just a mind, and
Yes.
do some things to support your body if you're going to, run very tight for a big chunk of the day, I think.
Yeah, without a doubt. So awesome. So for people who want to figure out their body types, how do they do that?
Well, you can buy Making Babies, which is available, online and at all good bookstores still, and read the book. Or you can just go to yournovacenter.com for free and go to the fertility types page. There are descriptions of all the fertility types. Once you've identified yours, you can go to the page for your fertility type and go and get lots of free advice from us, which we're very happy to give you. We're sort of evangelical about handing out good advice to people getting pregnant. You can buy a fertility type tincture. You can just follow the diet if that's too expensive. You can do this without buying anything. And I wanted to make sure that we offered that to people,
That's
that we
great.
gave people enough information that if they didn't have the resources, this isn't about selling people things for us, so we make suggestions of foods and exercises and things that you can do that you don't have to spend money on, but we also suggest supplements for different types, as well as the formulas, the herbal formulas. And if you can't work out what your type is, it's usually really obvious to people, actually, but if you can't work out what your type is, there's a quiz that you can take that will work it out for you, and that's all on the yournovacenter.com.
That is amazing. And it's great because everybody gets to benefit, which I love, because there are people that can't afford it, especially now with the pandemic. And so everybody gets to benefit.
It's important to me. It's always been important to me, Michelle, that we stay very accessible for people. I think the health of a practice is the diversity of people who come to it. And I've never, for that reason, we're a very good practice. We get very good outcomes, and I'm sure we could put up our prices, but I've always resisted putting up our prices because we're by no means the most expensive acupuncturists in New York. Because I wanted to be accessible to lots of different people at different price points, not just for them, but for us. We are a healthier community and a healthier practice when we have a diversity of people coming to our practice. It's better for our practitioners. It's more fun. We meet lots of people. I think it's good for the patients. There are lots of opportunities at Unova to get together on Zoom and do webinars. And I think when we bring our different life experiences to it, we're all better off for it. We're all richer for that. So it's been an important value for me that we offer quite a lot of information for free, and then that we have steps up into our community, that you can come and do free webinars with us. You can, our blog, we've been blogging weekly since 2005. Now we blog every day, I think.
That's great.
So we have a huge archive. We've got lots of free information.
Awesome.
And then you can step up a little and do a fertility coaching and support group. Or if you live in New York, you can come in and have regular acupuncture or reproductive massage. We have a lovely reproductive massage program, that kind of thing. And if you live far away, you can do virtual one-on-one consults. They cost a little more than being in the group. But, I'm trying to offer support to people at all price points, including free. Which I think is really important. And as you say now, it's hard for a lot of people. And one of the things I notice is that some people did very well through this pandemic. They were able to work from home and they stayed on the same salaries and then didn't spend much money. And some people were devastated, including us, people who work with their hands. And our incomes took a big hit. And so I very much want to support people who, through no fault of their own, ended up suffering because of this, extended lockdown. And I think there's so much hardship out there that it sort of breaks my heart. I've been, happy to see recently that we freed up some funds for people, which is really important because there's a lot of suffering out there. And if you're trying to conceive a baby during all of this, what do you do? If you think your time is running out and you feel you can't wait, but suddenly, your income has dropped, this is a really hard time to try and do that. On the one hand, you have more time to be pregnant. Which is good. Some people, on the other hand, you have less funds. And so I'm really conscious of wanting our community in New York and our broader community online to sort of give them access to as much as we can, as cheaply as we can, because our mission is to help people conceive. Our mission is to heal people in all sorts of ways, actually. We also have a pediatric practice and a general pain practice and a wellness practice, but we have a big mission to help people conceive, and we're really good at it and we like doing it. So why wouldn't we do it as much as we possibly could?
Absolutely. And you are great at doing it. And I thank you for that. I thank you for just everything that you do for the community. And so for people who want to reach out, it's Yenova.com. Correct?
It is.
I'll have
Actually, Yenova.com gets to us, but the website is yenovacenter.com. There are 3 centers in New York, 1 in Brooklyn, 2 in Manhattan. There will be more Yenovas as we come out of this. We were already planning to come to California when we all got shut down on lockdown, but we will resurrect, keep moving and keep spreading the word. But if you go to yenovacenter.com, it's a website, as you know, Michelle, that's designed to help you get the help you want really quickly. It sort of funnels you to where you need to go, no matter what. We have a whole section for the LGBTQ plus community. We're very interested in supporting the trans community because we think we're good at it. Our hormone specialty combined with our ability to help people recover from surgeries makes us really helpful, I think. So we've wanted to create resources for the trans community. We want to help the gay community conceive in all sorts of ways. And so you pick your funnel and go through it, but you will find information for you. And our practitioners are a sort of diversity of experience too. And so there are practitioners with specialties that will be for you, and you'll be able to find that out if you're interested in seeing us online.
Awesome, Jill. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Michelle, thank you. What interesting questions. I love our chats.
I know. The best. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.